ongoing Palestinian attacks, 2 wars between Israel and Lebanon, the Arab Spring, a bloody civil war in Syria, the rise of ISIS and Christian persecution. The list goes on. Who's there? Who's in the midst of it? Our CBN News Bureau in Jerusalem has been on the front lines covering it all. Today, on the 20th anniversary of its humble beginnings, Chris Mitchell shows us how it's grown into a global outreach.
On August 17, 2000, I arrived in Israel with my wife Liz and our 3 children, Philip, Kathleen, and Grace, to open the CBN News Bureau. We had no idea what would begin just 5 weeks later. The bombing comes one day before the International Court of The Hague. A 4-year-long campaign of Palestinian terror attacks and suicide bombings, known as the Second Intifada, rocked Israel. It was a chaotic time to not only raise a family, but to begin a business. It started in a one-room office, a small staff, and a mandate to cover the news from a biblical perspective, without a bias against Israel or the Jewish people. During the ensuing years, we've been able to cover firsthand how Jerusalem and the Middle East remains the epicenter for world-shaking events.
Our Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell, joins us now from Gaza Strip.
In 2005, we brought you the wrenching Israeli pullout from the Gaza Strip as thousands of Israelis were evicted. The next year, Pat Robertson joined us on the front lines of the 2006 Second Lebanon War and prayed for Israel live on the 700 Club.
And we pray for Israel. We pray for these who are engaged in fighting. We pray for those who are in leadership that they might have wisdom.
Minutes later, he was interviewed while Hezbollah rockets struck the hills behind us. When the Arab Spring erupted in 2011, we sped to Tahrir Square in Cairo, where thousands gathered to protest the government of Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. CBN News covered the rise of ISIS and its reign of terror, from the bombed-out city of Sinjar to a mass grave of Yazidis. We sat down and felt the anguish of a woman who just lost her son, and saw the ruins of the Islamic State after its demise in the city of Mosul. We spent time with the Kurdish Peshmerga, the brave men and women spearheading the battle against ISIS. We met face-to-face with persecuted Christians and told the world about the awful rise of Christian persecution throughout the Middle East. Many times, CBN News went to Israel's southern border when wars broke out with Hamas, and went underground on Israel's northern border to get a rare look at a Hezbollah terror tunnel. And we've been on the scene during the Trump years and covered the historic decision by President Trump to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. And we saw the opening of Saudi Arabia to the world.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell.
In 2011, CBN News began the award-winning program Jerusalem Dateline. Now entering our 10th season, it's broadcast around the world and translated into multiple languages.
Выпуск нашей программы. Я Крис Митчелл.
Over 20 years, our viewers have seen prophetic stories of the Jewish people returning to the land of Israel, and the remarkable archaeological finds that prove the Bible, like the seal of King Hezekiah and the pilgrimage road in the city of David where Jesus walked. Through it all, the Bureau sees itself like the book of Isaiah says, to be watchmen on the walls of Jerusalem, and also like the tribe of Issachar, to understand the times.
Chris is with us now. Chris, you know, like the biblical group, is it time or times sufficient for you now? Or what do you think?
Well, the times are amazing right now, Pat. You know, just in the last few days, we've had this UAE peace deal, which really just reshuffled the whole Middle East. It really has profound geopolitical and prophetic implications. You know, Turkey's considering cutting off diplomatic ties. They say they're never going to forgive the UAE's hypocritical behavior. And hypocritical may be the term for Turkey, since they already have normal relations with Israel. Why are they so upset, Pat? They want to be the leader of the Muslim world. They increasingly see Israel as an enemy, and they're allying more and more with Iran and Russia. So what are the prophetic implications? In Ezekiel 38 and 39, it says that a confederation will come against Israel when it's dwelling in safety and security. And some are wondering if right now we're seeing the beginning of that safety and security before this confederation comes against Israel from the north. And Pat, you know, in 20 years, there's a lot of stories. And I want to tell a story about you on the northern border of 2006, on Israel in 2006. We just had it in our clip right there. It's one of my favorite stories. So 4 o'clock, we have a 700 Club. We do a live shot. You prayed for Israel. I get a call from Fox News. Jennifer Griffin calls up and says, we want to do a live shot with Pat at 5 o'clock. Well, Hezbollah didn't get the message. And so Katyusha rockets are falling from Metula to Kiryat Shimona. You know the geography. It's about 5 miles away. And so when we get to the production facility, they tell everybody we have to go into a safe room. Well, that lasted about 3 minutes with you, and you said, I'm going to go up on the roof and do the live shot. And there you were doing the live shot with the smoke from the Katyusha rockets in the hills behind me. And so after 20 years, you know, there's a few acknowledgments. And, Pat, I just want to single out you. I want to thank you and honor you, Pat.
Thank you.
So when I came here 20 years ago, I stood on your sterling reputation, the goodwill that you had built up for decades. And we're here to continue the mandate of what you told the Lord on the Mount of Olives so many years ago.
That's right.
That you would stand with Israel and the Jewish people. And we take that seriously. Gordon and his Israeli documentaries, they've had a profound impact here in the last several years. And we serve with an incredible news professionals led by Rob Ullman, an amazing staff here in Jerusalem. And in those 20 years, we've had the support of CBN partners. And where would we be without them? Prayer warriors who have faithfully prayed for me in the Bureau. And I think I'm alive because I've been on the front lines with ISIS because of their prayers. And Pat, I just want to end with this. The hero of this story is my wife, Liz. She came to a war zone, raised a family, stood by me with all these years. And a shout out to Philip, Kathleen, and Grace. And I like to say that they came on the journey, but they stayed for the adventure and were ruined for the ordinary. And I love them all. Whoa. And the best is yet to come. And most of all, Pat, the Lord, He's been with us all the way. He promised never to leave us or forsake us. He's been faithful to that promise, whether on the front lines with ISIS, whether up with you on the northern border in Israel, or here in Jerusalem.
Well, Chris, it's a fabulous job you're doing. I want to expand a little bit about that Ezekiel 38 thing. I've been waiting for that to happen. When a coalition is going to come against Israel, it's going to involve Turkey. Gog and Magog is primarily in Turkey. And we've got Syria in there. You see, and Rosh means head, but it could be those nations in the Caucasus region. And Magog is right there in Turkey. And Chris, do you feel that we might be on the border? If that's the case, it would be a major invasion of Israel by people like the people from Iran who vowed to destroy Israel. And now Erdogan is getting on board. Could this be possible in the near future, do you think? Are the signs beginning to line up for that?
It's very possible, Pat, and here's why. Because, you know, when you read Ezekiel 38 and 39, it says that Israel is at a time of safety, security, unwalled villages. And so why would that be? And it's possible, and some people are thinking or speculating that these peace treaty with the UAE and Israel, could it be the beginning of the safety? As well, you're also seeing this confederation, Turkey allying with Iran and Russia, and could be this one day, this confederation that comes down against Israel that's in safety and security. I don't know if we're on the cusp of it, Pat, but we're seeing that trend right now, just in the last few days of what's happening. And maybe all this is leading up, obviously, to the Lord's return eventually. So, Pat, you know, looking ahead, we're going to have a lot to report on, and we'll have a lot to talk about in the years to come.
Well, you're not a living history, you're making history. So Chris Mitchell is doing a great job, ladies and gentlemen, bringing you the news all over this nation and all over the world. Chris Mitchell in our Jerusalem News Bureau. Terry.
Well, now is the time for Christians to show the world that we will support Israel and the Jewish people. To help you do just that, we have a free booklet available. It's called Why Christians Stand with Israel. In this, you'll discover why Christians support the Jewish state, and you'll learn why we must stand together with the Jewish people. If you'd like to get your free copy, call our toll-free number, 1-800-700-7000, or you can visit cbn.com/standwithisrael. We'd love for you to have this. It's a great little booklet and something every Christian really should read and